And then I had a baby, and then I took my 9-week-old child to Synod and had to figure out that what that was going to be. Fortunately, I'd come up with at least 7 of those ways before I had the child. So what we're going to talk about today is a little bit of a modification of that, because I don't want us to just talk about small church ministry. Although that is my area of giftedness, that is my area of passion, I also know so many faithful and effective large membership churches. I also know that the tradition of what we talk about when we in the church talk about success stories is wonderful, vibrant, great ministries in large membership churches get lifted up as successful, great things that are happening. And ministers like me who are serving churches in small towns with pretty few resources, whether it's dollars or people, sort of feel like I don't really have any idea how to make that happen where I am. So today's workshop is going to look at 8 ways that churches of all sizes can learn to be more vital as they learn from healthy and dynamic smaller membership congregations. So our small churches today get to be the models for all of our churches. And we know that all churches, of course, are tasked with changing the world by proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ. This good news that we are loved and that we are saved for a purpose of healing and of making whole this good creation. And the first way that we can be a vital congregation of any size is by rooting our mission in our identity. And small churches are uniquely suited at showing how we can root our mission in our identity. Small churches can't do everything, but they can do 1 or 2 things very, very, very well. And when small churches know their niche, when they celebrate it, when they are unapologetic about who they are, and when they live deeply into that identity of theirs, they discover all the ways that God is calling them to live out that identity missionally in the world. I told you a little bit about the Red Oak Church. When I was called in 2003, in some ways I represented a compromise. I was a heterosexual married woman. So all of the older members of the congregation who were a little uneasy about this open and affirming thing, or even a couple of the 4 or 5 members who voted against it, could say, well, yes, we're an O&A church, but we have a straight pastor. And all of the younger people who had driven a lot of this progressiveness, who were really excited and passionate about the future, could say, yes, she's heterosexual, but she has 2 moms. This issue is not going away for us. And so we've lived really deeply into that identity. I think when I arrived, some people hoped that that issue just kind of would happen and we'd move on. But we didn't, and we haven't. And surprisingly, a lot of our growth has been in younger heterosexual families who love what it is that we're about. So that's the first way, by rooting our mission in our identity. If you all are the church that makes the best pies, think about how those pies can be central to your missional identity. Maybe you sell the pies and give the monies to overseas missions. Maybe you bring the pies to your soup kitchen. Not for Thanksgiving, not for the 4th of July, but because it's the 3rd Thursday. And people could really use a delicious, home-cooked sweet treat. We forget that's tending to people's souls too. Now, another way that we can learn about fabulous, healthy, life-giving ministry from small churches is by the ways that they right-size their governance structure. Right? How many of you want to be trapped in meeting hell just because those bylaws say you must have a deacons board that has 12 members and a deaconesses board that has 12 members, and you must have a Christian education committee of at least 8 people, and you must have an altar guild of no fewer than 4, preferably married women. And of course, there must be this church council, right? So people get to spend all their time in church, if they're not at worship, in meetings. We've already heard, didn't Ben already say that people don't want to be in meetings? They don't even necessarily want to join things just for the sake of joining. They want to be out doing things. So we want to be able to empower one another to be about the mission and ministry of the church in the world. We don't want to burn people out. So if you worship fewer than 50 people on an average Sunday, you probably need 1 standing committee, maybe 2, depending. You might have just a council or a governing board that rolls in all those traditional responsibilities of elders and deacons and trustees and whatever it is that you may have called your building and maintenance committees. Now there might also be, well, we need stewardship stuff. Okay, well, 4 months before the stewardship campaign, get together 3 or 4 really gifted spiritual people who are grounded in money and their faith, and have them be an ad hoc committee for the length of time that they need that to happen. So this freedom, I mean, it really frees people from, the tyranny of death by committee. It allows people to follow their passions, to recruit others to mission possibilities. And this also models for the world, not just the church, but for the world, a freer and healthier way of being in community, of daring to risk, to experiment, and to play. There's an excellent book by Dan Hotchkiss, and if you're writing that down, it's Hotchkiss, if I'm not mistaken, called Governance and Ministry. And it really delves deeply into this issue of bylaws and the way that we organize around ministry. So that would be a great place to start. For those of you who happen to be part of smaller membership congregations, Doug Walrath's book, Making It Work, and that's WALRATH, if I'm not mistaken, is a really great 90-page, easy read. I honestly read it in about an hour. That covers a lot of basic stuff around church administration in a small membership church. So those are some good resources for you. Now, the third way that we can all learn to be healthier congregations is by focusing on relationships over numbers. Now, everyone who studies small churches, anyone who's ever written anything about small churches, affirms that the things we do exceptionally well and the things that places like Willow Creek are trying to figure out how to do, spending millions of dollars doing it, revolve around relationships. You don't need a small group ministry when you worship 12 people on Sunday morning. You are a small group. Huzzah! Go ahead, invite Bill Hybels to come to your church and to see how you live and care for one another. And then go ask him to replicate that 14 gajillion times in all of the Willow Creeks and their satellite churches throughout the country. So when small churches are good at relationships, they're welcoming, they're hospitable, they're friendly. They're also, not vampiric. They're not overwhelming to people. I'm sure you've all had that experience. Well, maybe you all haven't ever had that experience. Sometimes in a smaller membership congregation, they get a visitor for the first time in 5 months, and they're like, oh, is it Megan or Megan? Tell me your whole life story. Which committee would you like to be on here at church? Meanwhile, you were thinking, I wanted to sing some hymns and pray a little and, hear a sermon. Didn't really want to be recruited to 14 committees. That's not doing hospitality well, of course. But when those small churches can do that, it's such a great model. In a small town, here's how it might look. Oh, you're in Anderson. Well, my elementary school teacher was in Anderson. Oh, are you related? Yeah. Well, how is she doing? I heard she retired about 10 years ago. Oh, well, that's just marvelous. Church is just about to start. Can we talk more at coffee hour? I really would like to hear about how Miss Anderson's doing. And I want to hear all about you too. But, you don't necessarily say that part. And then in a big city, you might think, oh, you live in Woodside. Oh, I know this fantastic restaurant over there. My friend's brother bartends over there. Taste, have you heard of it? The conversation can go that way. In larger churches, it's true, there may be more connections. But in smaller membership congregations, those connections are more readily apparent. And making those connections readily apparent invites transparency, and it also invites a deepening of the overall relationship within those congregations. It's also a point of fact that in a small town, everyone's related to everyone else. So you dare not speak a bad word about anyone, even if no one in the room is an Anderson, because they're probably related to someone. So focusing on relationships works when it's rooted in that genuine care for and interest in our guests. Not a bid to try to increase our numbers or grow our Sunday school program or restart our Sunday school program or solve the budgetary woes. But here's the thing. If your church focuses on relationships and on being genuinely friendly and welcoming, the way that those wonderful small churches are so good at doing, the numbers tend to increase. And if they don't, well, you're still getting to know each other better and more deeply, and there's great value in that too. So that's the third way. The fourth way that we can be a vital congregation, and the way that we can learn from small churches is how to be more vital, is by letting go. We can let go of programs that no longer make sense. We can let go of nostalgia of the past. We can let go of wishing we were something we simply aren't. People enter hospice in part in order to learn to die well. And certain programs and aspects of church life can also be hospiced graciously. If your men's group doesn't even get 2 men to come to a program or a Bible study, it may be time to give thanks for the seasons in this church's life in which that was meaningful, and to let it go. The only women coming to women's group are in their 80s and 90s, and they just can't bear to make the home-cooked delicious treats and coffee and tea. And they don't understand why the women in their 30s and 40s and 50s aren't coming on Wednesdays from 1 to 3:30 in the afternoon. It's okay, first of all, to invite them to ask the younger women why they aren't there. But if they've asked, if they have gotten answers, and if they either haven't heard the answers or they've chosen not to change in regard to this, it's okay to give permission to let go of that program. Small churches can provide a way to model death that is contrary to our culture. Because in the church, we don't see death as the end of all things. It is the opportunity for a new and glorious life. By letting go of something that is draining life rather than giving life, we make room for resurrection to bloom before our eyes. Now, this may be the moment where the good people at University Congregational Church, I'm just picking on you guys, might think, oh, okay, but we can't really let things go. I have a great example from a very large, very prominent church. I actually know a little bit about the culture of University Congregational. I know you all are playful and experimental, so I don't think that's too much of a problem. But for those of you who maybe are, others of you that may be in program-sized churches and thinking their programs kind of provide some of our bread and butter, we can't do it. When I had just graduated college, and in between those years and the time I went to seminary, I was an administrative assistant at Marble Collegiate Church in New York City, which is a very large, very prominent downtown church. If you've heard of Norman Vincent Peale, the power of positive thinking, that was the church that he was the senior pastor at for more than 50 years. And by the time I was there, he had formally retired from the church for 20 years, and he'd been dead for at least 5 or 6. But his presence was still very felt in that church. And they had a new woman minister there. They actually, they called the first woman minister in the collegiate system, which is, a big deal if you're in the collegiate system, I guess, in, 324 years or something. And she retired, but, still had an office and came in every day. And a new woman was called. And I'm sure that you think you know where the story is going, right? She was getting undermined a lot by that. And, of course, at that time, I sort of saw this was going on, but I didn't really understand it. So a lot of this is coming from as I've gotten older, looking back on that. So Kimberly, the new pastor, really, things were really struggling. There was some grumbling. And finally, she and the leadership team said, we're taking a year off from doing program as Women's Fellowship. We're going to take a year off. We're going to pray. We're going to reflect. We're going to listen to the women of this church and what they want and what they need. And we're going to go from there. People thought she was nuts. People thought she was getting ready to get her head handed to her on a platter. I'm not kidding you. I mean, the other ministers were like, this is insane, this will never work. That program's dead now. And of course, the former pastor who led this, great, glorious heyday of this women's ministry, of course, was kind of also sort of, this is gonna be a nightmare. I can't really say so publicly, but I will privately. Kimberly persisted. She and this team of leaders got together. They prayed every week. They just prayed. They held rituals and liturgies together. They had listening posts after worship. They listened and listened and listened. One of the things that all of the women who were in this leadership circle got at one point was this little prism. It was a little three-dimensional triangular prism. And we were told, I was sort of the scribe for this group, sort of by accident, but I was the scribe for this group, and so I got one. And the idea was to receive the messages that we heard and to reflect it back. And this little prism was to remind us of that. And we did this for a year, and you could feel people's anxiety. Are you sure? But in December we always do this sort of program. Not this year. But we always have a spring retreat. Not this year. They listened, they prayed, they shared the feedback that they had gotten. And then, after that season of discernment, they created a fall retreat. Does anyone want to guess what happened? 100 women registered for that retreat. 100 women in New York City. The largest retreat that they had ever had for this group. And there was an entirely different spirit about all of it. And, not insignificantly, people recognized finally Kimberly's authority and leadership and giftedness, because she was willing to let go. Now, when the people came and grumbled to her, she didn't say, "I don't want to hear it." She heard it. She created space for grief and lamentation to enter. It's important that in that letting go, that we make space for people's sorrow at what was. In my kind of context, we would say that it is important to lament that because there are more and more women working outside the home, a chicken and biscuit dinner fundraiser run by the women of the church is probably not going to be feasible. Also, if the women who have the recipes for the chicken and biscuit dinner are all in their 80s and won't give them to the women in their 50s, much less the women in their 30s. But it's important to let people grieve, to let the tears flow, to let the anger be expressed. But remember that we don't grieve as those who have no hope. We offer thanks for what's been. We acknowledge the work and the commitment of those longtime leaders. And we thank God for the season of life in that church. And it's important to point out that that's also a true thing to do when churches themselves close. And so usually what happens is even if churches were very big, they dwindle until they become a small church, that small remnant church. But then eventually it may close. But even in that, we can show a way to the world how to let a cherished institution die well. Because a church may close, but the church lives forever. That's the fourth way, letting go. Now, the fifth way that we can learn how to be a more vibrant church from smaller churches is by looking at the ways that they celebrate who they are. Of course, they're not, they're lamenting, but they're lamenting privately. Publicly, they're celebrating who is it that we are. It's not just enough that we say, okay, we know who we are, we're going to, root our mission in that identity, but let's celebrate it. Okay, so we're not the church that attracts all the young people or those who love PowerPoint and rock music in worship. And just so you know, not all young people like PowerPoint or rock music in worship. Many young people love singing the old hymns or really enjoy coming to a place where for at least an hour a week they can be unplugged from technology and they can tune into their environment. Or at the very least, they like being in a place where that's not there, because if it's there and it's mediocre and they're supposed to be praying and inside they're thinking, really? We're doing Joys and Concerns with Comic Sans? Again? Yeah, I just got all the graphic designers, all 4 of you. Yeah, I mean, almost not. It would be better to not have technology in worship than to have really mediocre technology in worship. You all might be a part of a church that has a really vibrant ministry to retirees. And I hear you saying, oh, but the youth are the future of the church. Where are you? You're not the future of the church. You're the present of the church, And those of you who are in your 30s and 40s, you're the present of the church. And those of you in your 50s and your 60s, and your 70s and your 80s and your 90s, and those of you who are in your 2nd century, you are the present of the church. That is the reality. We may be the church that eats with the poor every week. Maybe we're the church that partners with recent immigrants in finding health care and housing. Maybe we're the people who say, you know what? Homelessness is not okay. And we are about dealing with homelessness in our city or in our small town. So whatever it is that you are, celebrate it. Small churches know how to do this. They say, oh yeah, we're the church that has the, green tree with the purple ribbon around it, or whatever it is that you have. Celebrate it. And say when you come inside, then you'll learn all these other great things about it. So mention it in your newsletters, write press releases. In small towns, even a poorly written press release sometimes is better than the articles that are there. Yeah, right? Yeah, it's true. I'm just doing a quick time check. We've got plenty of that. But the important thing is that small churches, when they are healthy and vibrant, are bold and unafraid of who they are. And when you are bold and unafraid of who you are, that's how you know there's life in your church and life coming into your church. Another way that we can become more vibrant, and a way that small churches can teach us to do that, is by enjoying the present. This is way number 6. If we enjoy the present, if we love each other, if we have fun as a church, that's a good thing. Fellowship and friendship are as important to a congregation's health as mission is. I truly believe this. If all we're ever doing is talking about how horrible and hard and broken and sad the world is, and how we've got to be helping everything, and it's so heavy and intense all the time. Oh, dear God, please, could we just have a bag of popcorn and Evan Almighty? Really and truly. I'm not kidding you. We did that once. We did it. We had popcorn and Evan Almighty one night. We had 45 people show up. People who had no affiliation with our or any other church. Like, popcorn? Movie at a church? We'll go. No problem. Invite your friends on Facebook. Even if they go to other churches, who cares? Even if they don't go to church. Even if they don't like Jesus. Just think it's a movie. It's, Steve Carell. Everyone likes Steve Carell, right? And so we need to focus on our identity. Not every moment has to be deep and mission-driven. Paul Nixon, in that great book, I Refuse to Lead a Dying Church, He says, choose fun over drudgery. That's where the energy is. That's where the life is. When you are enjoying the present, you open yourself to the ways that the Holy Spirit is moving. Enjoying the present. Loving each other. Not just in the crisis times, but in the ordinary times. In the everyday times. Here's one way that I think small churches really have an opportunity to learn from our larger membership congregations. They do it by demanding excellence from their leaders, whether those leaders are clergy or lay, whether we're talking about the pastoral leadership or the governance of the church. Setting a model for what other churches can and should be doing is so important. How many of you are part of smaller membership congregations? So that would be fewer than, let's say, 150 in worship on Sunday.
That would be normal.
Okay, if I were to just say 100, fewer than 100, would most of your hands still stay up? Okay, cool. Great. Okay, so let me just tell you, I'm just, if you don't mind, I don't love to give tons of advice, but I'm going to give a little advice. Do not let anyone tell you that you'll be lucky if anyone wants to come and serve you, and you should just settle for the first candidate who shows interest. You all are better than that. And if you act like it, people will see it. And if they don't let that stop you. You're going to have to hustle. The United Church of Christ has a great employment resource. I highly recommend it. I love it. I think of that as a starting point for churches. Here's a hint. Large membership congregations don't just rely on their conference staff when it comes to getting the word out about pastoral vacancies. They do a lot of legwork in calling new clergy themselves. Here's what they do. They get ads in Christian Century. They call seminaries and say, hey, we've got this great pastoral vacancy coming up. Can I send you a flyer or a letter and see if any of your graduating seniors have any interest, or your recent alums? Now, I will say, I know Mike's not in the room, it is important to direct those candidates through the appropriate channels. I'm not saying do an end run around your conference, but do it. Call up your friends. You all now know me. I'm Elizabeth Dilley. My email address is liturgygeek@yahoo.com. If you think I might know someone who would be a good candidate for those congregations, send me an email. If you know people in other conferences, send them emails. Write it on Facebook. What's the worst that'll happen? They won't come? Well, guess what? They're not coming now. Or they might not be coming now. The best case scenario is you get this entirely new pool of candidates who are excited about different kinds of ministry opportunities. And if you believe that you deserve an amazing leader, even if you have to do some of the work of training that amazing leader, you will get one. All churches deserve excellent leadership. Let's talk about lay leadership for a second too. Please do not accept behavior that would get someone fired anywhere else, even if they're a lay volunteer, even if they are Brother Bob, who's the largest donor of the church, and his grandparents helped build this church with bricks hewn from their backyard, made with their own instruments that Brother Bob still has in his garage. Be a model for, when it is appropriate, loving discipline, straightforward correction of behavior. If someone threatens to take their money and go elsewhere, let them know that if they truly believe God is calling them away from this congregation, then all you can do is bless them on their journey. Stand firm in that. Do not be ruled by fear. By that fear of conflict, fear of losing money, fear of losing these cherished members. Be ruled by the Spirit who calls us to community in the midst of our differences. By the Spirit who calls us to health in our interpersonal relationships. Here's an interesting thought. If Brother Bob, with his hundreds of dollars that he gives to the church, maybe they're thousands, but you know, a lot of times the people who make those threats are not quite as significant as we think. But even if they are, if Brother Bob leaves and his money goes with him, who knows who might start to give more? Because the church no longer feels like it's under Bob's tyrannical thumb. Who knows who might enter the doors of the church now that this possibility is there? Demanding that excellence is a lot of work. It requires a lot of diligence in ourselves and one another. It is a spiritual discipline, but it is worth it. Now, the eighth way that we can all learn to be healthier and vital is by sharing what's worked with others. So we don't hide our light under a bushel basket. We know that just because we're growing, it doesn't mean you're shrinking. Even if you're from churches in Seattle. How many different churches are in the greater Seattle area? 20-something? Seriously? Wow. But guess what? Growth in one doesn't mean shrinking in another. It doesn't have to anyway. There is enough good news to share with all. And there are enough people who desperately need and want and are yearning for this good news that we can all grow significantly, numerically. So when we believe this, really believe this, we are vital and healthy because we live out a model of sharing and collaboration rather than competition and me-firstism. So what I'd like us to do, right now my clock says it's 4:09 and that we go until 4:35. So for the next 10 or 15 minutes, I'm going to invite you in your table groups, or if all of you at one table are a part of one community, maybe go mix it up a little bit and share one or two things that are working really well in the congregation that you're a part of. Just share with one another, and then we'll have a little bit of time at the end to go to the microphones and share with the large group. So go and share. And I take it as a high honor that you're not really listening to me, because you're listening to each other, and that's more important. But I want to hear from all of you. So if I'm not mistaken, both of these mics are on. And if someone is really excited about that one great thing that's going on in the congregation that you're a part of, go ahead and make your way to the mic and share it with us. I know some people are deathly afraid of microphones. That's totally okay, but if you're not deathly afraid, come and share so that we can all benefit. And I'm just going to take some notes.
I'm Peg Fallman from Keystone United Church of Christ in Seattle, and 11 years ago Rich Gamble was called there to close the church down and provide a year of hospice and say bye-bye. We're still here. They sort of banned all committees back then. We do have a moderator and a secretary and a treasurer, but we don't have committees. About 3 years ago, we had an all-day retreat, and again, the question came up, should we shut the doors? And we said no. At that point, we formed 3 teams: social action, communications, hospitality, and building team. And what happens is we meet quarterly. We have a potluck from 6:30 till 7:15. From 7:15 till 8:15, our teams meet. This is quarterly, 1 hour. We have gotten more done because people congregate around their passions. Our social action team brought 2 of the resolutions to the floor today, plus a ton of other stuff. That was just in the last 3 months. I cannot believe how much we've gotten done. And people just, you never know who's going to show up at these meetings. All these different people, whenever they plug in with their passions. It's just, and we redid our bylaws to reflect what we're actually doing, rather than having the church do what the old bylaws stated we needed to do. So
that's a great thing to do. Thank you so much.
I'm Pam Taylor with Wayside, UCC in Federal Way, and we have between 50 and, on a great day, 100 folks worshiping. We have exactly 171 members. I know this because we just did a capital campaign and we raised $500,000 in 11 weeks. But one of the things that I'm particularly proud of is that we started a program because some of our members had a passion for it called Our Whole Lives, sexuality, education with our young people. And we've been doing it now long enough, it's been 5-6 years, that we have young people who took the training when they were in junior high school and now are young adults, and it has changed the way they are in relationship with people as young adults. It's very significant, and their value system, as well as their inclusivity, and the whole way, their way of being has been influenced by it. And by continuing to do it, I know that the trainers from Wayside have trained other people within the conference, that it's spreading within the conference, that now in our latest class we alternate between junior high and senior high, and my grandson is taking both of them. And now we have other churches, it's ecumenical, it's interfaith. We have a Jewish synagogue who now is getting involved with Our Whole Lives. And it's just a very exciting ministry with young people talking about what they're interested in, sex.
And relationships. Thank you so much, Pam. What else?
Katie Lloyd, ordained UCC, and I attend Finley Street Christian Church Disciples in Seattle. And I'm actually sharing a story on behalf of Klaus and Becky Hepke, who go to Everett. I was so compelled by their story, and they were feeling a little shy, but I have Klaus here to correct me if I need any help. But they were sharing their building with a Ukrainian congregation, and had become open and affirming in the intermediate time. And the Ukrainian congregation didn't really like that they were open and affirming, and were kind of beginning to harass and sabotage the relationship in little ways. Do you want to speak to that? Or?
Yeah, they were doing things that were not really good. They interrupted people trying to get to church, or even locked a woman in the bathroom and stuff like that. Strange things, so we decided not to extend their contract and let them go. And it was, we lost $2,400 every month.
Every month?
Congregation came through anyway, so we managed to survive. So that's part of it.
Well, to speak more to that, so they decided to give up that $2,100 of monthly income to let go of a ministry that wasn't working for either party, and to make their congregation a safe place, to make it really feel safe. And then we're really running in the red, put out a letter laying out the financial situation, that you were going to have $200 in April left or something. It was just some
We were down to
drastic.
nothing almost. The tax bill came through for $1,700, so we sent out a letter, let the congregation know, and in 3 weeks, we took in $1,500. 15. Oh yeah, 15,000. Sorry. There's an interim minister there. Details.
Can I just repeat that? In 3 weeks, they took in $15,000.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Katie and Klaus.
I'm Jan Skaggs with Newhart, MCC, UCC in Tacoma, Washington. And really, since we've joined you all, it's been great. We love it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But what works for Newhart, first of all, is prayer, and second is laughter. We have a lot of fun at church. We have a lot of children. There are times that we'll have 40 or 45 adults and maybe 35 or 40 children downstairs in our children's program. And some years ago, we prayed specifically for children to come into our church body. And we got answered prayer. We got answered prayer. It is just phenomenal. And so one of the things we say every Sunday is that we believe in the power of prayer. And we will stop our services if somebody needed prayer, and they will stand up and say, I need prayer. We'll stop service and pray. If a child comes up and needs a hug, we stop service and hug a child. So, or we serve communion holding children, or announcements with children in our arms. And they really have made a difference. And I hope and pray that those little kids know that we just love them and empower them. And it's a huge blessing to Newhart. So thank you for listening.
Thank you for sharing.
I'm Mary Lou from Huey from Shalom United Church of Christ in Richland. And we did have a successful capital campaign, and our new church building will be dedicated tomorrow. And one of the things that has worked really well for our church in many ways has been food. And one of the ways we've done food has been Wednesday night dinner. It started out kind of as an organic thing between children's choir at 4 and then the adult choir at 7. And so everyone who participated in choir had dinner. During the remodeling, there was no place to sit and eat a meal together. We just have opened our new fellowship hall. And I just was saying to Dana, we have to go back to having Wednesday night dinners, because it was big and important for us. And it's really great to hear stories of other churches who've gone through remodeling projects and survived. And so true about if you build it, they will come, and really people are coming and donating money and giving from whatever resources they have. And it just amazes me really every Sunday when I get to do the count and or when I'm there, I'm the counter. And it just makes me so happy to write down a number bigger than 100. I just love it. So anyway, thanks for listening.
Congratulations. Wow. Friends, our time is at a close for this workshop, but the stories are not done. So I hope that you'll find time to hear more stories, to share more stories, and to learn from each other what's working in the places where you are finding spiritual nourishment, and how might that work in other places. May we close in prayer. Mighty, living, wonderful, amazing God, pour out your Spirit upon us. Pour out your Spirit upon our congregations. Make us more than we are today, more than we were yesterday, more than we imagine we might be. God, you have formed us in your image, and so you call us out into the world to go and to be creative. And you call us out into the world to go and to heal wounds. And you call us to go out into the world and to break down barriers. Strengthen us then with your Spirit to be faithful to these your callings. We ask this in the name of our Jesus. Amen. Thank you so very much. Now, according to your schedule, you've got about 15 minutes to digest some learnings and